Hey everybody, this is Jason with Modeling Pros, and I wanted to show you a couple of things that I've done since the last video. You may remember in the last video that I had shown you a technique I had used using salt in order to create some chipping effect on the wings. When I went to brush off the salt, I had scratched the paint up some, so I was displeased with that outcome. I came back in with the airbrush and the fuselage color and filled in the places that I had damaged, and then I went back with just some Testors metallic silver enamel, and with a very fine paintbrush I just touched up some of those areas to re-brighten them because they had gotten darkened just a tiny bit with some of the overspray from the airbrush as I was cleaning up the areas that I wanted to remain green and not scratched up. I went ahead and decided to do some more chipping around the plane as well. So using that enamel, again that metallic silver enamel, I went ahead and just took some random places, as you'll see as I'm going to try to show this to you here. Like here you can see some, there, some rivets here that I put some of the metallic silver on to make it look as though those areas had been brushed up against enough that they had been that the paint had been worn away. Around this door hatch, this hatch here, for this storage door, a little bit there. The main places that I really wanted to do it, and hopefully I'll be able to bring that in where you can see it pretty well there, are along these flaps. So you can imagine that these flaps would be getting a lot of wear as they're going up and down and as the wind is blowing over them. And so I tried to create an effect of the paint being rubbed back down to bare metal along there. Also over here, hopefully you can see it a little bit. Not sure how well that's showing up on the camera. Anyway, I did that all over the fuselage in various places and on the wings. I probably went a little overboard looking at it, but that's okay. I don't mind. It's the first time I've ever done chipping. It makes the plane look quite worn. I'm okay with that. But always remember that as you're working along doing these things, if you overdo something, it's really not a big deal to paint back over it with the main fuselage color. If you leave it, and well, let me say it this way: if you leave it, it's also not that big of a deal if you don't go back and paint over it, because you're going to still be doing a lot to the model after this point. It's not going to look, when it's done, as it does at this point, especially if you do post-shading, weathering, if you do any kind of washes. Another thing that I did was I went ahead and painted the rear landing gear here, and for that I used Testors Model Masters aluminum. So you know, when you go to work one of these models, you might be wondering, whenever there is a landing gear strut kind of like that one that has to be pinned in between the two halves of the fuselage, you might wonder, do I put it in now before, do I put it in as I'm assembling the plane, or do I wait till I've painted the whole plane and then put it in? And I've tried both. So let me tell you real quickly. I worked an F-101 Voodoo, and on that one, the front, there would be a landing gear right here on the fuselage, and I did not want to have to paint it in after it was on the plane. So I worked the plane, painted the plane, and then installed that later. I actually had to clip pieces of it off to get it down in there, because once the plane was built, it really wouldn't go in right, because it was made to go in before or as the plane was being built. It was unnoticeable, but it was a hassle. So what I decided to do on this one was just go ahead and put the piece in as I'm building the plane, and then paint it once the plane was done. So those things are done. I've also glued on now the rear stabilizers, and I used this Extreme Power medium thickness, which I purchased at Hobby Lobby. And then the last thing that I've done on here, once I was relatively satisfied with the state of the paint as it is now, I went ahead and put a coating of the Johnson's Floor Wax over the entire plane. So now everything that I've painted so far up to this point is sealed in. Now, one thing that happens when you apply the clear coat, whether you're using a Testors or a Vallejo or whatever brand of clear coat you're using, or in my case, just floor wax, it's going to darken everything down. So, you know, if you go back and watch the previous videos, as I'm showing the bottom, you might notice that the color looked a little lighter than this. Same with the fuselage color here. I'm really happy with the darkening. It does a couple things. Darkening the top in this particular case, on this particular plane, actually has turned the fuselage color into something that looks more like the real color of the plane. I've looked at a lot of pictures online and it was darker. The pictures online are actually darker than what this was so far. This clear coat really darkened that down. It also, on the top, but more so on the bottom, really brought out the post shading. So I hope you can see that on camera. The post shading really shows up fantastically now. So anyway, the next step is going to be using this Vallejo paint to change the color of these pieces right here and the insides of these flaps, and then install those flaps. So I'll be probably showing you that next time. Okay, thanks for watching. Have a great day.